Got a phone call, and it's somebody that you know. Spocko is on the line. I'm hoping you'll be able to hear him.
Hello there.
Lisa, can you hear him?
Can you hear me?
I can. Hey, Spocko, it's so nice to hear your voice.
I am so glad to hear from you, and I was going to write you out about some of these things, but I see Nicole asked a bunch of the questions. I've been very interested in the next steps of Trump violating both his pretrial conditions and the protective order. And I've been talking to Glenn Kirshner about it. He did a nice video about the next steps. Could you talk about the specific next steps that will happen from getting into the point of, we know Trump's going to violate them. Who files the motion? Where does it come from? How does the judge decide on a show cause hearing? Could explain that part. And then the next step, showing the different pieces that are going to happen to get to the judge do a stern warning, a contempt. Could you explain that process? Because I'm hearing everybody saying, oh, this will never happen. He'll never spend time in jail. He'll never stop using Truth Social. I'd like you to explain the process, because I really think the judge is going to rule on it, and I'd like to hear how it's going to go.
Well, I appreciate that, Spocko. I have to say, like, in general, I don't speculate much, but what I can say is, I totally respect Glenn's work, Glenn Kirshner's work, who you mentioned, and your efforts as well, Spocko, to bring things to light. So I would just say, contempt is a power that judges hold. It's their power. They can act without a motion on any act that is in contempt of court. So she doesn't need a motion from the prosecutor to hold Trump in contempt. She can make that determination herself based on his actions. She can also entertain a motion, I suppose, from the prosecutor to hold them in contempt, but that's not necessary. She could ask for briefing on that, I suppose, but in general, again, that's not necessarily something that's even briefed. Typically, if a party is in contempt, the court handles that as a matter of her or his role as the adjudicator in that courtroom, and can devise, any number of appropriate steps to respond to that contempt. There could be a requirement, as I mentioned to Nicole, that he be held in contempt and be sent to jail. She could have that. She could issue that order and sort of delay it until after the trial, so that he's not, staying overnight in jail between trial, dates of trial. She could issue a fine, impose a fine, and then another fine for every single instance, and order that be paid. She could do both. She could issue other consequences for contempt. Of course, she has to ensure that the trial is fair, so that any result can be sustained on appeal. So she can't just basically rule against him and hold him find him guilty over a decision of a jury. She doesn't have that power. She has to have the trial continue. I do think it's possible that his behavior could be disruptive, although he's been quiet in court, but he could certainly at some point be so disruptive to try to cause a mistrial. Oh. That could be a tactic that I could see him deploying. And then she'd have to weigh, how to deal with his contemptuous activities in court if he were to do so, and what that means in terms of the ability to have the trial continue to its conclusion in order to protect a fair trial. So there, in short, there's a number of things that a judge has the inherent power to do, other than in a criminal trial to rule, basically to find the defendant guilty if he's requested a jury trial, which he has a right to request under the Constitution. And so I am confident that other than Judge Cannon, who I have no confidence in whatsoever, administering her role fairly, but for the other judges involved, I'm confident that they will, protect the integrity of the court, and act appropriately to hold him in contempt, as you say, when he acts with contempt of
Right,
court,
which he will.
and not going to get away with it. Yeah.
Right. All right. Thanks, Spocko. I appreciate the question. Lisa